The full roster for Grand Cathay in Total War Warhammer 3 has been revealed, and while there aren't many new surprises that haven't already been seen, there is new information about how they'll work in the game. In this video, I'll go over all the starting units in Grand Cathay's roster and detail their special abilities, though note, all of these are subject to change and specific stats are not yet available. Grand Cathay's legendary lords we've already met. MIAO believes herself to be the strongest dragon sibling and lords her power and position of authority as protector of the Great Bastion over her brothers and sisters. Despite her earned arrogance, though, she is well aware of the significance of her task and the consequences if she were to fail. As such a powerful and ancient being, she emits an aura of command and majesty that even mighty heroes find difficult to resist. Her followers seek her favor, and her enemies fear her bite and strong magics. On the battlefield, she can channel those powers to transform between her dragon and human forms as needed. For magic, MIAO has a selection of spells taken from the lores of Yin and Life, and her Disdain of Dragons unique ability makes it so that all enemies who try to fight MIAO will find themselves at a significant disadvantage. ZHAO, the Iron Dragon, is the ruler of the Western provinces. Seen as a much more down-to-earth ruler, ZHAO commands loyalty through comradeship, as well as creation and use of powerful artifacts and magical items. He's one of Cathay's premier alchemists and welcomes the same within his realm, much to the chagrin of some of his siblings. While less favored than his sister MIAO by their father, the Celestial Dragon, their mother, the Moon Empress, does have a soft spot for ZHAO. Both dragons lead their armies with incredible fervor. Their mere presence is enough to enhance the harmony and belief of their people to new heights. Non-character Cathayan units all ascribe to either yin or yang, and when close to their opposite, receive buffs in battle. For melee, yang units become more defensive and harder to kill, while ranged units, yin, fire faster. Lords increase these benefits when they are nearby. ZHAO, of course, has his dragon transformation ability and can swap forms in the midst of battle, becoming powerful melee units with the ability to fly, and he has access to the lores of Yang and Metal, while his unique skill, Warding Iron, means the Iron Dragon's near invulnerability can be passed on to his nearby troops for a short time. The generic lords of Grand Cathay will be dragon-blooded Shugengan lords. While relatively rare, the ancient nature of the dragon siblings means that sometimes they did get around, and their progeny now exist within Grand Cathay. They often rise to positions of power, not least out of respect for their heritage, but also due to the power that comes from being part of a, dragon family. The dragon-blooded, as they are known, are inevitably skilled combatants, natural sorcerers, and talented leaders. As the magic wielders of Grand Cathay, the dragon-blooded fight with either the lore of Yang or the lore of Yin. Each takes its power from the Celestial Dragon Emperor and is a unique school passed down through the ages. The lore of Yang focuses on buffing allies with resolute belief or disrupting enemies with walls of wind. In particularly dire situations, it can also unleash mighty explosions upon the enemy. The lore of Yin is a more esoteric school, with the power to reflect projectiles or summon the ghosts of the dead to assist in battle. Those who participate in it can shield their allies behind obfuscation and remove foes in the dead of night. For mounts, they can either get a warhorse or the JADE LONGMA flying unit that we'll go into later. The more melee-oriented general is the Lord Magistrate. Be they generals or lords of one of Grand Cathay's gargantuan cities, magistrates are some of the best the Empire has to offer. While not the greatest duelists of their nation, they are expert commanders, inspiring and directing their troops with the skill and efficiency that comes only from years of experience in real battle. In particularly large battles, magistrates may ride aboard a sky lantern, commanding their troops from above with a more strategic view of the battlefield. It's also, as you can imagine, keeps them somewhat out of harm's way, a priority for some, if not all magistrates. Their true strength, though, lies in their ability to bring the best of Grand Cathay to the fore, vastly increasing the bonuses received by troops working in harmony with one another. For mounts, they get both the Warhorse and Sky Lantern. Grand Cathay's heroes are drawn from lore that has existed for Cathay for quite some time. alchemists prove that the lore of yin and yang are not the only magics practiced in Grand Cathay. Over the years, the Iron Dragon in the West has built a powerful cabal of these exceptionally talented individuals, and often sees its members hired by generals all over the empire, as their capabilities are far beyond those of most mortals. Their potions imbue them with spells from the lore of metal, as well as giving them unique buffs that can be applied to themselves or nearby units, providing massive bonuses to attack or armor. Astromancers are the accepted sorcerers of Grand Cathay, practicing the Celestial Dragon Emperor's favored lore of heavens and harnessing it to an expert level. After more than 5,000 years of practicing and perfecting the art, Astromancers are quite adept at it, and only more so when riding to battle aboard the WU-XING war compass. But of course that's a later unlock, and they do get a warhorse as well. When it comes to Grand Cathay units, you have to talk about the infantry, and there's nothing further into the bottom of the barrel than peasant long spearmen. The backbone of Grand Cathay is its people, and there are a lot of them. While the Celestial Dragon Emperor is wise and his children are benevolent leaders, they do have difficulty sometimes seeing all of these people as individuals, and if nothing else, their sheer numbers are always appreciated. The warriors of wind and field, as they are known, feel a fierce loyalty to their cause and the dragons that watch over them. They may buckle and even break, but they still know their role and know their place. Like all melee units, peasant long spearmen are yang aligned, increasing their leadership in melee defense within close proximity to a yin unit. Their long spears give them fantastic charge defense when bracing, making them a suitable anti-cavalry and anti-large force, which is amazing for bottom-tier crap units. As noted, the endless ranks of Grand Cathay are expendable and expected to flee from battle when facing more than they can handle, so don't worry about losing. There's always another peasant to take their place. Finishing the fight is the work of more disciplined units, like Jade Warriors, who are Grand Cathay's line troops, the standing army expertly trained and well-equipped to defend from ogres, rebels, chaos, or anything that might wander in. Each city maintains its own regiment of Jade Warriors, and few make their home outside of one of these metropolises that dot the landscape of Grand Cathay. In times of war, these Warriors of Jade and Steel, as they are collectively known, head into battle armed in numerous ways. They come in both sword and shield and halberd variants, and have a few notable characteristics. Grand Warriors adopt a defensive stance when immobile, making them harder to charge and kill. This builds so long as they remain still, taking the lay of the land and bedding in to fend off the next attack, further increasing their charge resistance and armor. While the halberd-wielding variant is unable to block missile fire due to, their lack of shields, it is no less adept at bedding in to take a charge head-on and destroy any force foolish enough to challenge them. The Celestial Dragon Guard are Grand Cathay's elite soldiers and the official legion of the Dragon Emperor. Their arrival represents an exponential increase in power for the army, not least for the morale boost they give to any soldiers around them. Notably, they wield halberds, and they are natural opponents to the armored and the massive, as capable of spearing a beast from the Chaos Waste as a man on a horse. However, as the most well-trained units in Grand Cathay, they are capable of defending against charges from anything as well, so they'll again have high charge defense values. They're superior to the Jade Warriors in every way but one. There are simply just less of them out there. But any defensive infantry needs strong missile support to take advantage of it. Archery is considered a noble and useful pastime in Grand Cathay, and young girls are especially encouraged to follow the path of the Moon Empress into ranged combat. Thus, even the lowest in society will have a well-maintained bow within their household, though peasant archers are not particularly well-equipped and are more deterrent than professionals. As with any ranged unit among Cathayan armies, peasant archers are yin aligned and receive bonuses when close to yang units. Also, as they're still peasants, they're expendable. However, despite their vast numbers and excellent training, they're not very well armed, so don't expect them to do any damage versus heavily armored foes. Iron Hail Gunners are the closest thing you can get in the old world to a shotgun. The Iron Hail is a short-range blunderbuss that can rip through almost anything if positioned correctly. The gunners themselves are lightly armored, making them vulnerable if surprised, and quite the glass cannon of a unit. The strength strength of their gunpowder gives these units a heavy armor-piercing punch when they line up a shot, and though their range is much shorter than either archers or crossbowmen, they can still be used to quite the advantage if you put them in a position that takes advantage of their natural harmony and can pump out some seriously heavy damage. Crane gunners require 2 people to lift, set up, and fire. One is positioned at the trigger, ready to sight and shoot anything in a massive range, and the other carries the tower shield on which the gun rests, steadying the shooter as well as providing built-in cover. Except for artillery, crane gunners will outrange anything on the battlefield and are effectively snipers. Their armor-piercing rounds and heavy shields make them a unique and difficult unit to deal with, especially if unprepared. Jade Warrior Crossbowmen are the ranged backbone of the Celestial Army. The crossbow is as close to an industrialized production as Grand Cathay can get. This makes the Jade Warriors equipped with them a mainstay of city defense. They have 2 variants, the crossbow and the crossbow and shield variant. While their armor weighs them down slightly, they will defeat a peasant archer in all other areas, and that increased armor, especially when further improved with the shield, makes them difficult for other ranged units to trade with effectively. While not a melee troop, they will happily survive and even defeat lesser foes in the midst of a close range engagement, because after all, they are Jade Warriors. Celestial Dragon Crossbowmen are given Dragon Crossbows, repeating powerhouses with armor-piercing bolts that are ready to rip through almost anything. Shielded and with the best armor in Grand Cathay, very little can stand up to the hail of bolts from the Celestial Dragon Crossbowmen. Shields keep them protected, while the power of the crossbows make their bolts armor-piercing, and while not a true hybrid unit, they are still capable of an easy melee fight. But when it comes to cavalry and chariots, Cathay does show some weaknesses. Peasant horsemen are everywhere in the world, as the horse is the most common steed and beast of burden. Plenty of the peasantry learn to ride as part of their duties and carry goods or information across great distances. Thus, when called to war, many act as scouts and mount up in defense of the empire. Peasant horsemen are the fastest Cathayan unit that can't fly, and will deploy ahead of the main army to scout and act as a vanguard. Like most foot melee units, the cavalry belong to the Yang class in Harmony. Jade Lancers are what happen when you put a Jade Warrior on a horse. Grand Cathay's Jade Lancers are hard-hitting and well-armored, and often are put as part of scouting groups that head beyond the Great Bastion to break up and destroy chaos before it can reach the wall. Slower but heavier than standard horsemen, Jade Lancers will deal extra damage to infantry formations they crash into. They're also great on the defense, heavily armored with shields to protect them further. Conforming to Grand Cathay's defensive nature, they are far hardier than other factions' cavalry of a similar sort. Great LONGMA riders are dragon-blooded who have yet to rise to their own prominence. Flying to battle alongside other elements of the celestial hosts, they are the solution to the endless problems on the battlefield, from endless flyers to the hardiest of ground troops. You can always just throw a dragon-blooded on a winged horse at your problem. While Grand Cathay is really focused on dealing damage from afar, anything in the way of a great LONGMA rider is unlikely to survive for long. Their speed, power of their charge, and strength of their armor is unmatched on the battlefield, and such is the strength of the LONGMA charge that enemies have been known to flee in fear before they are even beaten. The Terracotta Sentinel has been highlighted before, and is a Grand Cathay construct that is an ancient protector from an era long past, when the Celestial Dragon Emperor was an active leader in the nation's armies. Tales of their creation range from the believable to the frankly legendary, that each was formerly a soldier in the Celestial Army, blessed by the Dragon Emperor. True or not, they stand sentinel over all Cathay, often silent and still for centuries, overlooking paddy fields or partially submerged in rivers, or even as stanchions in the Great Bastion itself. But the light within always burns, and the statue will finally move if summoned by a nearby threat. The last word in Cathayan defense of settlements and armies, they lay waste to anything around them unlucky enough to make contact. Truly alien to most of the armies of the world and either impossibly massive or an ancient enemy, it causes deep terror in the hearts of anyone who sees it because it's just so weird. They're equally good against something like a steam tank or a city gate, as well as laying waste to enemy armies. Grand Cathay also has a selection of flying war machines. Sky Lanterns serve a dual purpose on the battlefield. They're often crewed by magistrates or other commanders who can oversee and direct the troops below. However, they're also crewed by 4 crane gunners, sitting in an armor carriage held aloft by the balloon. While glacially slow to move around the battlefield, it provides a much-needed vantage point for troops below, allowing them to spot enemies hiding in foliage and giving them a morale boost. The crane gunners stationed inside them are truly deadly, and as nothing stands between them and their targets, they do not have to stop to fire, as they can see all from up above. As a flying ranged unit, both the Sky Lantern and Sky Junk are yin aligned. Speaking of, Sky Junks are more warship than simple battlefield unit. Its humongous size supports great guns that project shrapnel at oncoming hordes, wiping out whole battle lines. Within the armored carrier beneath the main balloon are a host of bombs ready to be dropped on those below. A larger and more deadly Sky Lantern, they're packed with soldiers that spew fire and rain rockets down on their enemies, but they're slow and completely useless when out of ammunition. When it comes to artillery, Grand Cathay gets the Grand Cannon, an oxen-pulled artillery piece that takes them from the city walls and Great Bastion they usually inhabit. More suited to firing from on high, these cannons will still rip apart anything when they gain sufficient sighting, but benefit greatly from smartly used terrain. While being Grand Cathay's most basic form of artillery, they still pack a huge punch and are more than capable of topping monsters or city walls. The flaming, armor-piercing projectile they shoot will make short work of smaller foes when placed in their path. Perhaps the oddest of Grand Cathay's armory, though, is the WU-XING War Compass. This miniaturized version of the Great Compass engraved into the floor of the Celestial Court, high above Wei-Jing, is a powerful tool for manipulation of the elemental winds. Imbued with the power of the heavens and intricately designed as a weapon of war, meteors and lightning storms are summoned in its wake. It's manned by a mounted spellcaster who has access to unique long-range spells that deal extreme damage to enemy formations. More than capable of tearing up the ground and crashing headlong into enemy forces, as it is a chariot, it is yang-aligned, but with significant ranged prowess, and it regains magical power with increased speed thanks to control over the elemental winds. But the ultimate in ranged firepower for the armies of Grand Cathay is the Fire Rain Rocket. These rocket launchers spray the battlefield with deadly explosive projectiles. These rockets are equally effective against almost all targets, and the arc of their fire easily penetrates enemy walls. While the impact of them is widespread at long range, this is only more effective against mass legions of enemies. Though it does have a shorter range than the Grand Cannon, it has much higher firepower. It gets increased reload speed if placed near a melee unit through yin harmony, and both Cathay and artillery pieces have a higher than usual number of support staff on hand, making them much harder to wipe out if caught. Overall, it gives you the impression of a very powerful defensive force, meant to sit in one place, stand its ground, and bombard or shoot the enemy until there's nothing left of them, and any survivors can be cleaned up by the infantry. They come across as something like Dwarfs 2.0, more focused on armored defense than magical defense, with their harmony ability encouraging you to play a very specific style that should be instantly familiar to Total War 3 Kingdoms players. But that is the starting roster of Grand Cathay. What do you think? There are definitely some places where you feel DLC might fill in the roster. So what is it you'd like to see from them in the future? Only time will tell, and I look forward to talking about it when the time comes. But until then, thanks for watching.